This is the opening of chapter 18 of my novel Ascension. The narrator hero, Alvise Marangon, has been recruited by the Missier Grande, the man in charge of Venice's police force, the sbirri, the much feared sbirri of the city, and has been asked to investigate a certain nobleman. And he's decided to begin his investigation by talking to the only known living relative of the nobleman, a son of the nobleman's sister, who made an unfortunate marriage outside the nobility, and the son now runs a cheese shop in western Venice. Ascension, by Gregory Dowling, Chapter 18. I made my way to western Dorsoduro. Perhaps the nephew could throw some light on his uncle's personality, even if only through family hearsay. For my purposes, any extra tidbits of information might be useful. I found the cheese shop near the church of San Niccolò de' Mendicoli. This area of the city has its own definite character, which can be summed up in one word: fishiness. Everything in the area is permeated with the tang of fresh and not so fresh fish. The alleys that slope down to the lagoon are lined with glistening tangles of fish nets. Everywhere you look are barrels and chests, either crammed with squirming heaps or coated with the silverily gleaming remnants of their passing. The streets themselves are slippery with sloughed scales and oily innards. The inhabitants, whether bearded fishermen, busy traders or sharp-tongued fishwives, mostly appear to wear clothes of a squamous consistency, and the children, who weave in and out of the crowds like darting minnows, all seem to be playing elaborate games with oyster shells and crab claws. The accent is different, with a rising intonation and truncated syllables, almost as if one were hearing the voices through water. The separate nature of this area of the city even has official recognition, with the local population being allowed to elect their own doge or gastaldo, usually a leading fisherman, who is received by the doge himself in the ducal palace after his election. I imagine that fastidious doge Pietro Grimani washes his hands thoroughly after greeting his piscatorial counterpart. The cheese shop was in a quiet street close to the church, and the owner had decided to do his best to combat the overwhelmingly marine atmosphere by hanging a number of pungent goat cheeses around the doorway. It almost worked. I entered the shop and breathed in the rich, crumbly odours with pleasure. "Signor, can I help you?" came a voice from behind the counter. Leonardo Mantovan, as I knew him to be called, was a small man in his mid-30s. He wore no wig, but had his thinning hair pulled back in a neat pigtail. He had a vaguely harassed look. Maybe that came from trying to sell cheese to fishermen. In any case, there was nothing to indicate that he was the nephew of a nobleman who lived in a palace on the Grand Canal. "Signor Mantovan," I said. "That's my name," he said. "And whom do I have the pleasure?" He didn't finish the question. He allowed it to fade away into inaudibility, like a crumbly ricotta in your fingers. I noticed that he did not have a Nicolotto accent, but then I remembered that he had grown up in Cannareggio after his mother had left the family home. "My name's Alvise Marangon," I said. "I hope you won't mind my troubling you with some questions about your uncle." "Which uncle?" he said, giving me a sharp look. "Your maternal uncle," I said. "Oh, well, I've never spoken a word to him in my life. And why are you interested?" "I'll be quite honest," I said, meaning it, more or less, but knowing the instant I'd said it that it was the surest way to be disbelieved. "I'm inquiring on behalf of the Missier Grande." "You're a sbirro," he said, looking at me with narrowed eyes. As he lived and worked in this area, a certain wariness was understandable. Most of the city's sbirri are from this parish. It's probably the only career open to anyone not fond of fish. "Not exactly," I said. "Just someone appointed to make discreet inquiries." "And so you come and talk to a shopkeeper about him?" Of course, I don't wish to be intrusive, but I thought it worth trying. You might be able to tell me something that you heard from your mother." "Well, I certainly never heard anything good about him from her." "I imagine not. Inquiries about what, anyway?" "Leo!" came a shrill voice from a room beyond the shop. "What's going on?" "Just a customer asking some questions, my dear." His voice became as harassed as his face when a large woman appeared in the doorway, her hands holding a wet cloth, which she was clearly in the process of wringing. She fixed me with a glare that intimated that my neck was next in line. "Are you here to buy cheese?" she said. "Well, I'll take a little of that pecorino," I said, pointing at the counter, and her husband quickly picked it out and placed a knife over it in interrogative fashion so that I should indicate the required amount. "You weren't talking about cheese," she said accusingly. Her accent was definitely Nicolotto. I hoped that mine was not too obviously Castellano. I could imagine her in the front line during the regular fights between the two factions on the Bridge of Fists. "No," I said. "I was asking your husband some questions about his uncle, on behalf of the Missier Grande." I hadn't really hoped the name would send her fleeing back in terror to the kitchen. "A sbirro," she said contemptuously, and gave a sudden savage twist to the cloth, which dribbled a few last drops.